welcome to episode 110 of Project Geekology. What do you get when you put Avatar and Ruby together? You get the Dragon Prince. Yes, that is what we are covering today. I am one half of your host, Anthony, and joining me as always is...
Dakota, and I have drank my hot brown morning potion. I am ready to go, even though, we're recording this at night. But I am so ready for this. I've been talking about the Dragon Prince for a couple weeks now on the show, and I'm excited to have finally brought on board two new Dragon Prince viewers. I don't know what to call you guys. I don't even know if you like the show, whatever. But we'll find out very soon what Anthony and our other host, actually, Rich... How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. It's the week off up here in New York, so I've been kind of maximizing that. Went to the Banksy Museum today, got some great eats in the city, and been filling my time with a lot of Star Wars Outlaws. Really loving that game. The stealth, it's difficult. Despite you telling me weeks ago that stealth is going to be very important, I still decided to go into some, I think I went to my first Imperial compound and I was just shooting everyone. I didn't care. And then I quickly got taken down. And after about 15 tries of just bum rushing it, I said, I think I got to slow it down. So
yeah, or at least try to go in through the side or go atop it somehow. And that's a lot of what Outlaws is.
But I'm starting,
and that's fun.
Oh yeah,
that's fun. But it doesn't work with all play styles.
Yeah, so it's definitely reining me in a lot, but I'm enjoying it. It's definitely a different look at Star Wars. I liked the Survivor, and I can't remember the other one right now, but the same one.
Final Order.
Yeah, Final Order with Cal Kestis. I like those games, but at the same time, I hated the maps. They wanted to make me kill, the lack of map or the terrible maps, where it wouldn't show you where you were on the map relative, if you were at the beginning of a passage or the end of a passage. So I got really frustrated with that. I'm finding that the maps aren't as difficult here, but as always, I said to my wife as I was playing, I was like, my favorite video games, my biggest enemy is the mountain. Whether it's Fallout Vegas, whether it's Skyrim, whether it's Red Dead, when you're down in Mexico... It's mountains, man. I'm just oh, there goes the marker. I'm right there. Oh, wait, no, it's actually a 500-foot, cliff face, and I have no way of getting up there, so now I have to backtrack 7 miles.
That is really annoying, and there's a lot of that.
I hate mountains. I just hate them so much.
Skyrim did that a lot,
but at least you could in Skyrim you could jump backwards while crouching and climb any mountain.
You could somehow you could climb any mountain. Yeah, it was so broken.
If you worked hard enough, I got to the point where I was like, no, I'm not doing. I'm gonna butt jump all the way back up this mountain, and I kind of missed the butt jumping.
And you know what? There was also in Oblivion, which is the Elder Scrolls game that came out before that, you could maximize your acrobatics skill.
Oh my god!
Which just allowed you to jump higher and higher. You could jump over buildings in that game. It just, and that's a natural. That's not a bug or anything. That's built into the game for some reason.
Well, that's because you could.
Your legs are just jacked.
That's because you could increase, you would increase running and you could increase jumping and acrobatics just by literally just walking around at Oblivion, just jumping. I would just jump for an hour.
And eventually, your jumps will be OP. You could get over pretty much most cliff faces that you couldn't normally get up. But yeah, that was fun. That was when games made little sense, but had a whole lot of
But we don't need them to, we really
bring back the acrobatic skill.
Honestly, my favorite thing is going through a really complicated dungeon, and then when you get to the end of it in Skyrim, they would just have an easy exit. I'd just oh, here's this rando door that leads to the beginning of the cave, and it made me so happy because the deeper I got, I was always will I be able to get back? And I just loved that. Oh, hey, here you go. I kind of I think Outlaws does that a little bit, where you'll get to the end, and instead of okay, now you have to sneak out, it's wait, here's another way out. I'm yay!
Skyrim would do that. There are dungeons where just one giant circle.
Yeah.
You would go down a little bit, go back up, and then you're oh, hey, it's a space above where you walked into, And you're like, man, like if I could jump up there, I could have just skipped all of this.
And so, if you guys ever do check out our show notes down below, there's usually like a 2 to 3 paragraph introduction that's provided as like an AI assistant to the podcast that the podcasting host website Buzzsprout creates for us. It basically like amalgamates everything that's said in the podcast into 3 paragraphs, and I assure you that the first paragraph is going to now just be about jumping in video games, and I can't wait to read it because it's just this podcast is about Dragon Prince, guys, mostly anyway, but it's gonna devote like a third of the introduction to just jumping in video games, and I think that that's the funniest thing ever.
Yeah, like I mean, we try to doctor it a bit.
No, we do. We have to, because sometimes it just doesn't even know who we are. It's just like,
Well,
anybody who's like into AI knows that those things hallucinate like crazy, and you gotta fix it.
maybe in that case we should jump into Anthony's big week
yeah.
because we like to jump.
Well, I'm gonna let you guys. I'll go last because mine will be like a little.
All right, so
it'll probably
I'll
go a while.
next.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go next. Yeah, I was working around the new house a lot this week. Finally figured out all the plumbing issues that we've been having. Like, for some reason, like the pump wasn't pumping. There was a leak in the toilet. There were certain things that just weren't hooked up. And I've been working on that pretty much primarily. But today, we kind of figured out all of that. We got like all the doors in place that needed to be, the final stuff facade-wise. And I'm really happy about that. And our appliances, fridge, stove, washing machine, and microwave come tomorrow on Thursday. So a couple days ago as of you guys listening here. So I'm excited to just finally have a workable home. But I did spend a little bit of time today going back into my project. It's been a couple weeks since I've actively worked on the Avatar timeline just because I've been, just busting my back on finishing this big project, which is a house. But yeah, I'm going back and I'm doing more timeline notes. I'm watching through Avatar again, and I just watched today the episode The Sun Warriors, where Zuko and Aang basically find out that dragons still exist in small numbers, and there's a secret civilization of basically like Aztec and Mayan people who are the original firebenders, and it's just fun. I miss fun stuff like that, and I'm excited to talk about more fun stuff like that today, because the show that we're covering, The Dragon Prince, is very much in that vein of perhaps a little bit more, wacky's not the word, but it's a lot more lighthearted, I think, than Avatar generally is. But yeah, I'm excited to jump into that later. But that's pretty much all that I've been up to, I think. And yeah, I'm going to send it right back over to you, Anthony.
Well, so I'm going to dedicate a little bit of this podcast to the weekend. So like Valentine's Day weekend. So by the time that y'all get this, would have been already like a little over a week since I've gone. But I went to a convention. It was called Animate Miami, and it was at the Miami Airport Convention Center. I've gone there many times for many conventions. I even went there for SuperCon back in its smaller, more humbler days. And yeah, man, it was a good time. It was its first year back since like I think 2018. The guy who runs it, he runs this convention circuit called GalaxyCon. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but the same guy owns these conventions called Animate. There's a few of them. He also does these things called Nightmare Weekends, which are, they're like more dedicated to horror. And so this same guy actually owned SuperCon way back then and sold it to ReedPop. So I think the reason why Animate probably stopped was because I think there was a non-compete in either Florida or South Florida for about 5 years, and then now that those like 5 years are up, they can go back. Yeah, he's back now. So this was this was its first year back. The thing I loved about going to this convention was that it wasn't quite packed yet. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was tons of people there, but it wasn't quite packed enough to where I had to park in the overflow parking. I actually got to park in the front of the convention center like all 3 days, and I was like, oh, thank you so much. I just don't like going to that overflow parking. It's scary as heck. It's like in the dark. I feel like I'm gonna get attacked like any like moment. I don't know why that overflow parking is so dark. I think there's lights there. They just don't turn them on.
Sure.
That was a problem with Otaku Fest for sure. And I know that Otaku Fest is going back to the Miami Airport Convention Center, so I don't know how that's going to work out. That's going to be just absolutely annoying, but I had a really good time. I always like going to these smaller conventions because there's like a certain like intimacy to it that, like, you know, although there's still a lot of people there, you don't feel like you're wall to wall just packed out. Like the previous weekend was MegaCon, and a lot of these vendors went to MegaCon, and a lot of them did like pretty well as far as like, you know, making money at MegaCon. Some of them didn't do so well on this weekend, and I think that it was probably because MegaCon, MegaCon is in Florida. It's like maybe I would actually call it like maybe the NYCC for Florida. Like there's no bigger convention in Florida than MegaCon. And
you didn't go though.
What happened?
You didn't go. Did you go?
No, dude. MegaCon is just too early in the year for me. It's too early for me to plan a trip to go up to Orlando, and like you know, especially after like, you know, the holiday season and all that stuff. It's just
sure, yeah.
It's just it's too early to plan a trip like that. At least with anime, it's a little bit closer. I can drive. And so, yeah, I think that, you know, a lot of people that probably went up to MegaCon also went to this one too. You know, a lot of Florida folk from South Florida. So I don't think a lot of them spent a lot of money, you know, because they're like, oh, I went to MegaCon. I mean, I made a few purchases. I mean, I showed you the little Jeff the Land Shark that I got. And I got a couple of other things. I got some Persona mouse pads.
Nice. Nice.
Dakota is smirking. You know, I know he wants to talk crap.
I know nothing about Persona.
Dakota hates
zero about Persona.
Dakota hates my Persona joy. He's writhing in pain. I could see
I'm an
it.
absolute hater. Apparently.
No, but they had like these viewing rooms. Every convention I've gone to has like some sort of viewing room. That, like, you know, one is like showing anime and the other might be showing something else. So towards the end of Friday night, after the exhibition floor closed, the rooms upstairs there's still stuff going on until like 1-2 a.m. But one of the rooms was showing Sonic 3. So like I sat in and watched Sonic 3 with like a bunch of like just, you know, random people that would pop in and pop out.
Was that the first time for you?
What happened?
That was the first time for you?
Yeah. I didn't see Sonic 3 in the theaters. So I sat in. I was going to sit there maybe for a little while, but I was like, you know what? Like I decided to sit and watch it. I mean, I think it started around like, you know, 8 o'clock and ended maybe, I don't even know how long, maybe close to 10 or a little after 10. So, I mean, so it was cool. Like, I mean, they were showing Sonic 3. They had, you know, anime there. There was actually another like podcast that was kind of walking around there. They were called, I have them here. I was connecting with peeps out there, Dakota. I was connecting with peeps. They're called,
you met real people?
Real people, yeah. Freestyle Anime Podcast. And, you know, I was kind of like, you know, just, you know, talking back and forth. They saw that I had the press pass and they're like, oh, are you like with the publication? I was like, no, I'm with the podcast. And they're like, oh, for real? We are too. And, you know, it was really cool. They had some of their own merch and they had like, you know, anime hot takes and all that stuff. You know, Dakota, I've been wanting us to get together and do something at a convention together. Believe it or not, they told me that like, maybe not the bigger conventions, but some of the smaller ones. That he said that they've gone to a few, and he said that they're always like that the conventions are always looking for people to fill out panels, and so they had a panel. Oh no, They didn't. Did they have a panel? No, I don't think this time they had a panel. But they said that they've done a few panels, and a lot of them are like, anime hot takes. And I'm like, dude, like, I was
It
like,
would
if
just be so funny. It would just be so funny if we ever did a panel and it's just like 5 people in the audience and like two people leave or something.
he said that that a lot of these panels that he's gone to, they'll like fill out. It's just keeping them in there. And I'm like,
it's places for people to sit.
right, exactly, and to
yeah.
listen. And I'm like, you know what, the perfect one for Dakota would be like, and I know you would be like all into it, would be like talking about the MCU timeline,
Yeah, I could see that.
And I'm like, Dakota could do a panel on that, and then we could bring Rich down, or wherever it is that we do it. But no, I thought that was cool. I was like, man, I didn't consider doing a panel, but that would be interesting to like, that wouldn't be random. Like if we go do a panel at some random convention and we have people like, oh, I listen to you all the time. I'll be like, what the heck? Just like in a random place.
Random. Yeah,
but
that would be random.
The closest I've ever, I was on this like weird wrestling YouTube interview show that they do weekly, and the next night or 3 nights later, I was still in Mexico and I went to an arena for a show, and some guy was like, hey, I saw you on TV yesterday. And I'm like, oh, what's going on, man? He's like, Rich, right? And I'm like, that's weird. I'm like, that's super weird, because like it's the nichest of the niche, right? Like it's a YouTube it's a like lucha libre YouTube show, I mean, I guess I was at wrestling, so I guess it's not that crazy, but
yeah,
it's definitely I mean, I could definitely see Dakota doing a panel 1000%.
Yeah, maybe someday.
Yeah.
I've gotten recognized by people in the past. Sometimes I'll be at like an opening night screening, and it's the people who are at opening night screenings who are most likely to have experienced my work or seen my face online somewhere. So I'll sometimes get people say, "Oh, wait, are you that guy?" And yeah, I'm that guy. But my favorite was at New York Comic Con one time. I was walking into the bathroom, and someone stopped me and they're like, "Dude, are you Geek Critique?" And I was just taken aback because I was just like in the bath. I had to like get to the bathroom, and I was just in that mindset. I was like, "Yeah, Dakota, what's up? What's your name?" And he told me his name, and then he's just like, "Good luck in the bathroom." And yeah, that was.
Dakota just had to let one loose, and this guy wanted to talk.
But yeah, so any cool stories from the con or?
They did have a. And I kind of like stayed a part of that because one of my friends went, but after the festivities on Saturday, they had like this like emo like music night upstairs, and they were playing like a bunch of like stuff that like we grew up with. There was Green Day. They were playing like Papa Roach, Linkin Park,
AFI.
and was it like Slipknot, whatnot, and like even some of like the newer like like later in the 2000s, like when you like fell off of like kind of listening to rock.
That's cool.
But yeah, no, that was a good time. I got a few things. I got the Jeff, the mouse pad. I felt bad for the Artist Alley. I always feel like Artist Alley, they always get stuck in like just the corner somewhere, And in SuperCon, like they're like kind of out on the main floor, and I know that like to save space because the Miami Airport Convention Center is a little bit smaller, and like the other like showroom that they had there was like the place that and Rich would have loved this. They had wrestling there. It was like character wrestling, and so like upstairs in like one of the like I guess bigger panel rooms is where they had Artist Alley, and I went up there and perused a couple things. But yeah, man, overall I thought it was a pretty fun show. I expect it to grow. It was not the smallest convention I've been to. It was already like there was like money put into the advertisement and stuff, and I mean they had the bigger Galaxy Con that it's connected to, so it's not like a group of people trying to make a convention. Like I think Otaku Fest is genuinely like the smallest like convention that I've kind of attended that's blown up to what it's blown up to, you know?
So you think Animate Miami is going to blow up eventually?
Yeah. I think that it'll
It'll take
probably
a couple years, but yeah.
Yeah, it'll probably grow out the Miami Airport Convention Center, but I was just happy enough to enjoy it, and it's
In its infancy.
you know, in its infancy, you know, being able to not have to park in, you know, the overflow parking and total darkness. But yeah, man, it was I enjoyed it. It for those of you that are in the Miami area that like conventions that were either couldn't make it to it or weren't, you know, that were kind of like on the fence about it, I wholeheartedly, you know, I recommend it. Hopefully they have it at a better time that, you know, it's not too close to MegaCon so that all the vendors and artists can make, you know, more money next time.
Folks, this sounds like a juicy 5-star review if I ever heard one. Speaking of which,
Juicy.
you should probably take some time out of your day. You know, if you're driving in the car, I understand don't do that while you're driving, but when you stop driving, or if you're doing anything active, when you finally stop that, please be sure to go to your podcast application and click that 5-star rating, because we need a juicy one. We need a juicy review, you know?
We need to be juicy.
Yeah, that's how it goes here. But why don't we take a step back from Animate Miami a little bit and talk about the topic at hand for the day? Unless, Anthony, you had more to say.
No.
We're good to go?
That was my spiel. We are good to go.
The Dragon Prince, Season 1. We're covering the first 9 episodes of the show. I think when I first started watching the show a couple months back, I was surprised how quickly it was to just get through episodes, because the story is just easy to digest. There's not a whole lot of like new narratives thrown in at you throughout the course of it, and it's all one overarching story and through line, basically like chapters in a book, you know. So it's a really easy show, at least for me, to have binged, and I was surprised when I got to season 2. Not because of what happens in season 2 or anything. I'm just like surprised that, oh, you know, I finished this in a very short time. Maybe this would be a good idea to, you know, cover on Project Geekology. And I finally convinced these two bozos to get on board. Guys, what did you think?
So it's, you know, it's weird because if you put it down on paper and you had told me all the beats, I think I would have said, it's derivative and it's pandering and I don't think I'm going to like it because they're trying to force me to like it. And then I liked it. Like, there's no business. Like, there's one line that really catches it for me, and it's like, you know, he grabs, I can't remember the name of the animal, you know, and he's like, say hello to my little friend. And I'm like,
oh, Bates.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm like, hold on. Like, what are we talking about right now? Like, this is like most likely a kid's show. Like, I don't know. Like, I was really confused.
When I tell you, listeners, that, you know, if you go into this with like a, you know, a cultured, you know, view on pop culture and you've experienced a lot of things, you're gonna just find little just like throwaway lines that are very clearly from different things. They, like I've mentioned on the show a number of times, that they reference Avatar: The Last Airbender like all the time throughout the course of this show, and I noticed a couple more times during this watching of season 1 that I'll talk about later. But yeah, there's tons of that. There's a whole scene in
there's a lot of
5.
one-liners.
There's a whole lot of one-liners, like Rich said, say hello to my little friend, and you know, Bait just glows and becomes
and then what you said, like when you first, like, you know, spoke on this episode about the hot brown morning potion?
Yes.
Yeah. And that made me laugh because, like, I was like, oh, that's
kind of like a real life joke in there, yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of like references to like actual like other titles. Like there's a whole scene that's like very reminiscent of like Twin Peaks in the Red Lodge scenes that blew my mind that they were able to get away with that. And like most people watching probably had no idea what the heck was going on. So in the first episode, Claudia, the daughter of the High Mage, she's reading a book in like the main courtyard, and the book is called Love Amongst the Dragons, which is a play that Aang and his friends watch at the end of season 3 of Avatar: The Last Airbender in the Fire Nation. It's like a popular Fire Nation play called Love Amongst the Dragons. I totally missed that the first time through, but that's something that Claudia was reading, you know?
Oh, I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, it's super super minimal. And then, you know, like in Avatar: The Last Airbender, we have characters like Sokka, who, you know, the actor Jack DeSena plays a major character in this series.
Yeah.
And
It's like very similar.
Oh, it's the exact same character.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
They
it's
they
so
even
weird.
play off the. They play off on the idea that like he's the plan guy, which is exactly what Sokka was in Avatar: The Last Airbender. And there's even a line in Avatar: The Last Airbender where it's like, the new plan is the old plan, and that's a major part of like they're trying to figure out what's happening on the mountaintop later in the season. I think someone says something along the lines of like, no, the original plan is correct. The new plan is the old plan, and it's just like, if you. Yeah, it's just fun. If you're paying attention and, you know, like, you can watch this show completely oblivious to any and all Easter eggs and references to either real life or other titles. And it's fine. It becomes a fun show. But it becomes, like, just a game of, like, haha, I caught that. Haha, I know what that's about. It becomes a game of that. So I thought that was pretty cool. I'm glad you picked up on, obviously you picked up on say hello to my little friend, but that's a very blatant one.
Yeah, there were a lot of things like at first I honestly I was like, I don't know. It did remind me a lot of Avatar, but I don't think it hit me as I don't know why it hit me right away. I didn't realize it was the same voice actor until I actually looked it up later on. You know, when they went on a quest at one point, and I was like, it's very Lord of the Rings. It almost was like somebody was like, let's just take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and these people who like this kind of stuff will like it. And that's why I kind of was resistant. But then by the end of the season, I'm like, gosh darn it, you got me. The only thing that drives me crazy, there's one thing about the entire show. I watched episode 3, I gotta say, like 3 times. And every time I got to the end and I said, did I miss what happened to King Harrow?
Oh.
Okay.
Okay, so we have to talk about that.
And then, you know, like, I get it, and we'll talk about it, right? But it's just that episode for me was very confusing. It was very.
I think it's meant to.
Yeah, but it.
To be honest, I don't actually know the answer to this because I'm 5 seasons. I've seen the first 5 seasons.
Oh, okay.
And that has not been answered. But something happened in that room, and I feel like that's going to be explored later down the line. They kind of give you the idea that the king's soul was forcibly swapped into another body to protect the king's life, but the body of the king was killed.
Okay.
Because,
but we just never get. There's not even a square down scene, really. Like, I kept rewinding. I started like scanning the episode. I'm like, am I crazy? Like, did I just miss the scene? Because it just goes from like, here's the attack, and then episode 4 starts with a funeral.
Anthony, what did you think of that? We haven't really spoken to you at all.
I felt like the scene was alluded to the king being killed, but there's an obvious reason why something wasn't shown. But I feel like I picked up on the moment that the king was in the throne room and, you know, supposedly something happened. Obviously it was something going on with the High Mage, which is like very much so like his character reminds me of Jafar like a lot. You know, like he's got
yeah.
you know, he's like the second in command, and you know, he obviously has this ulterior motive of ruling the kingdom. In this instance, it's Jafar with kids, and I know that he's kind of roped his kids into this thing, but I don't hate them. Like, I feel like
they're very likable.
They're very likable, and I don't think that. I think when push comes to shove, they're not gonna. I mean, you're further than us, you know. So I'm going, you know, based purely on speculation, but you know, I think that, you know, whenever this confrontation happens, that they catch up. That I don't think that they're gonna actually want to harm Ezran or Callum at all.
Callum, yeah.
And you know, and like they're just very silly, you know. I really like the joke that, oh my gosh, what was the son's name again? It was
Soren.
Soren.
Soren, right? And there he was talking about the tallest mountain in, was it Kaltuk?
Catullus.
Catullus. Yes, and he's like, you could say that it's the tallest mountain, and
Yeah.
dude, I loved how, like, corny it was, and it was meant to be that. And
Yes.
there's a lot of, and they're both like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, like, their characters are very likable, and I feel like, unfortunately, they're pawns to their father. And yeah, like, I can't wait to see, like, how their story progresses, because I'll be honest, like, at first, when I first started watching it, the show didn't grab me right away. It took, like,
Yeah, it's a little bit of a slow burn. It's like charming, but it's like, am I really gonna get into
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
right. I feel like by episode 4.5, 5 is when, like, it started to grab me a little bit more.
So let's talk a little bit about the overall premise of the show, because I know probably a lot of you who are just casual listeners to the podcast and don't follow along with every single title don't know what exactly we're talking about. So The Dragon Prince is a show on Netflix. It's like fantasy animated series. Anthony, you already mentioned that it's kind of like Avatar: The Last Airbender, a little bit of Ruby. I've heard people compare it to Arcane. I have not seen Arcane, but basically the story premise going into this series is that the lands of the east and the west are divided in the middle. The lands to the east are like magical elf lands. The dragons live there, and at some point 1,000 years ago, the humans learned a new type of magic that killed other life forms so that they could, wield magic. It's called dark magic, and that dark magic kind of separated them from other races who used like natural forms of magic, and basically that caused a rift in their society, and there's a long-standing war between men and elves for, I'm assuming, about 1,000 years. So in this show, we pick up a couple weeks after the king and his advisor, the High Mage Viren, go and kill the Dragon King. And this is a character, like the Dragon King is a literal dragon king who protects the border between the two, the east and the west of this continent. And in so doing, they also supposedly killed the Dragon Prince, which was an egg. But we find out early on in the series that the Dragon Prince is still alive in egg form. And during a assassination attempt on the king's life, the elves are retaliating on the humans at this point. In an assassination attempt, one of the elves, Rayla, goes and finds the two human princes, and they show her that the Dragon Prince egg is still alive. So the three of them are now on a trek to bring it back to the other side of Zadia, which is like the elf lands, and bring it to the mother dragon, basically. So this first season is only the start to their journey into Zadia. I don't even think they've made it into Zadia by the end of the season. And a lot happens, but we start to realize that the High Mage Viren is not as altruistic as he seems. He seems to be very power hungry and opportunistic when it comes to taking over the throne after the king is supposedly killed. So it really throws you in on this like power struggle, Game of Thrones type thing really early on. I would say it's a very, very engaging and very fun show. It always keeps it lighthearted with its, humor and writing style. But, some heavy stuff does happen, especially later on in the series that you guys don't really know yet. But, we'll eventually, hopefully, get to that point. But yeah, that's kind of a basic premise of The Dragon Prince for those of you who aren't aware.
Right, and we opted to cover this whole first season in one episode because it really is. It's really easy to talk about the entirety of the season in one episode. It's not extremely lore intensive in the way that like the Rings of Power is. That requires it, and even like Shogun,
And it's also short episodes. I think it's like 20 minutes apiece for 9 episodes. So it's like a long movie, basically, that you're watching all together. And yeah, I find it, just a really enjoyable little TV show that, we don't have to cover every single week because I know that there's 7 seasons, but we can break it up with other things. But, it's something that we could fall back on easily, and I think it's a joy to watch. So what do you guys have, I'm curious, what questions are left in your minds having watched the first season? We'll start with Rich. Outside of, what happened to the king.
So I guess 7 seasons is a lot. I can't. I mean, obviously the journey is going to be a lot of the way. I mean, I think.
So hold on. I'll break it up. The first 3 seasons is the journey to bring this dragon prince back home.
Okay.
That is its own quest. The second set of 3, the seasons 4 through 6 apparently are a second part or a second quest that takes place a couple years later. And then I don't know what season 7 is. I'm assuming it's just a wrap up of everything.
Yeah, a culmination of.
Is that the final season
of the different plot threads?
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, I wonder how it's going to kind of keep our attention. I just feel like, one, the world is very, I don't know how to put it. The world works, right? But I think it's also a very tired world in that, it's your basic, I mean, it's very much like, it feels like it's Avatar, but in Lord of the Rings. So you even have the elemental forces kind of, right, going on there, but then it's just in your high fantasy element of medieval times. I do like that. I don't feel Game of Thrones is American accent that can't work for this time period. I mean, I know there's dragons, but only the British know about that, so everyone's got some sort of an accent. Whereas here, I mean, you have the elves with their Scottish accents, which I love. I do like that there's just also American sounding dudes, because I mean, most of the humans have an American accent, so that is definitely not the norm for most fantasy.
I do like that you bring up the fact that the elves have the Scottish accent, because I don't think I've ever seen that before in my life. And it's interesting.
Yeah, it's usually the dwarves.
Right?
The dwarves,
exactly. The dwarves usually have that type of accent. So having some type of elf that speaks like that, it was an interesting take. And it's not anything I hated. After a while, you just get used to it.
Yeah, you don't even hear it after a little bit. But I will say the first time I watched it, I was just okay, so they're playing on the tropes a little bit. Dwarves are the ones that are always given the Scottish accents. But now it's the elegant elves are now given a very thick Scottish brogue. And it's a very fun paradigm shift in that respect. So I like that.
Right. Well, these elves are kind of they kind of remind me of the drow, they're not a wood elf, they're not a high elf, they're dark elves. I mean, they're called moon shadow elves.
Yeah.
So
there are different types of elves that you'll eventually encounter throughout the series.
Okay, cool.
And I will say they don't all have a Scottish accent.
Well, duh.
Do we get any elegant sounding dwarves?
I'm trying to think if there are dwarves. I don't know. As of season 5, I don't think dwarves exist. I think it's just humans and elves in this world.
Oh, okay.
But I could be. I might just not have gotten that
dwarves
far.
always get the short end of the stick,
That's probably due to their height.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay. What did you guys think of some of the humor? I know that for me, one of the most disarming things was the humor, and disarming in a good way. There were certain things or scenes that I was just this is kind of silly, but the humor is making up for things that in my head otherwise I'd be this doesn't really make any sense. But the humor gives it that edge that changes the way that I experience a scene. So there's Aunt Maya, which is, she's a warrior woman. She's the aunt of Callum and Ezran, the princes, and she's deaf. She eventually, tasks her assistant, I think his name is Corporal Glenn or Gren,
Or I think she like makes him a commander.
Yes, Commander Gren, I believe his name is. She makes him, yeah, Commander Gren. Sorry, she sends him on a quest to be the head in a search for the kids. And as soon as she leaves, he's imprisoned. And Soren's like, oh, sorry, Commander Gren, bad news. You're off the hunt. And he's just like, but I'm supposed to be leading it. And then the next scene is him just like chained up in the dungeon.
No.
And
My favorite part of that scene, it was like, oh, if you want to talk about it, we can meet at like 9:00.
Yeah.
And then the next scene, he's like in the dungeon. Yeah, dude.
yeah, but he says like,
He's so dumb.
that works with he goes, that works with my schedule.
Dude, I know, and I'm like, bro, like this guy is obviously like acting very like nefarious and kind of like, you know, that he's up to no good. Like he makes it very obvious that he's up to no good, and so like the humor in that moment, it like, I'm like, it's like this guy's just like, he just got pulled off of this search and rescue, just
Yeah.
out of nowhere, and he's like, oh, if you want to talk about it, you can meet with me, like and like somewhere like
In a dark alley
Quiet?
at midnight, you basically.
like, dude, hello, that's like, that's an invitation to get shanked, like, come on.
So I love that throughout the season, like the rest of the season after the fact, he's just kind of like a recurring character in the dungeon. And whenever Viren goes to like visit his elf prisoner, whenever he leaves, like there's a little interaction with Commander Gren. My favorite is, he's trying to like get the elf to eat the fruit, and he leaves.
Yes.
And Gren goes, I'd like some elf fruit.
It was like
As he's
Zadian.
walking
It was like a
away.
Zadian citrus, and he was like trying to get him to
Yes,
eat
yeah.
it. And then like when he leaves, he's like, "Oh, I'd like to try Zadian citrus," and he just like completely ignores him. Dude, yeah. That part had
So-
got me too.
Let's talk about some of the characters, because there's a lot of great characters in the show. There's Callum, who is one of the main characters that you're following throughout the course of the series, played by Jack DeSena, who also voices Sokka in Avatar: The Last Airbender. And there's his younger brother, or younger half brother, or no, not half brother. He's not like blood related to Ezran, but he's a stepbrother. And yeah, Ezran he's next in line for the throne. The young prince, because he's a direct line to King Harrow. And the two of them have such a funny, almost like they reminded me of the two brothers in Over the Garden Wall.
Oh,
Wirt
yes.
and Greg.
Yes.
Well, because Callum is a little bit more straightforward, even though he jokes a little bit. And Ezran is just completely,
a kid.
he's
a kid.
He's just a kid,
Yeah.
He's a kid with, instead of like instead of a frog that he carries around, it's a glow toad. So I don't know if that was a reference to Over the Garden Wall, but it reminded me of Over the Garden Wall quite a bit.
Yeah, I liked that they named him Bait, and they had like a whole explanation why they named him Bait.
It's because he's delicious, apparently.
Yeah, like apparently they're used for bait, and like they don't want him to go in the water because he doesn't know how delicious he is.
He doesn't know. He can't know. What do you guys think about the magic system? So, Rich, you mentioned that there were 6 elemental powers, basically. So there's the power of the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, the water, so I think they call it the land, the ocean, and the sky. I think they avoid using like Avatar: The Last Airbender terminology. So instead of fire, it's sun. Instead of sky, instead of air, it's sky. Instead of earth, it's land, and instead of water, it's ocean. Something like that, which I like. But
Yeah.
I think everyone watching this who has already watched Avatar: The Last Airbender is just like, oh, okay, real clever guys.
And it seems like they have like some other elements. Well, I don't know elements, but like that there's like definitely something going on with the moon too.
So yeah, that's one of the 6 primal elements. The moon and the moon shadow elves take their power from the moon.
Yeah.
Which kind of is a similar concept to something that they had in Avatar.
Yeah,
like
with the waterbenders.
Yeah, they were strongest during full moons, but this takes it kind of to the next level where they're basically like invisible and invincible. So I thought that was neat.
If you guys
But
ever saw, there's a book named Angels and Demons. It was also a movie with Dan Brown, yeah. So he also wrote Digital Fortress, and it's essentially it's like Angels and Demons, but with like computer ciphers instead of like, you know, the scroll codes that they had in Angels in that series. And this gives me the same vibes that, like, it's very, you know, if you're a fan of the first one, you're into it and you're like, you know, you guys got some stuff, but if you I think if you kind of just roll with it and don't,
it's easier.
Yeah, because if you start fighting it, or if you start trying to pick it apart, I think that's where you'll kind of get in the weeds with it. But if you just kind of like let yourself go, I think it's really enjoyable.
So with this magic system, it's interesting because humans aren't given the ability naturally to learn the 6 primal elements. So supposedly 1,000 years ago, there was a human mage who discovered dark magic, which is basically like you suck the life force out of other living things to use their power as a new 7th form of magic called dark magic. And it's obviously like super evil and corrupting, and you get some glimpse, you know, Viren like looking extra creepy during some points of this season because he's just so corrupted by this dark magic. And you can even use it to like re-energize yourself. Like there's a scene where he uses like this glowing butterfly to basically rejuvenate his original human form look, and it's really creepy. And you'll see eventually, if you guys continue watching the show, that it like does corrupt you in other ways physically. So I think that that's pretty sweet.
And then it was interesting that Callum uses this, you know,
the primal stone.
Yeah, the primal stone, you know, Palantir thing, you know, that has like a storm. I thought it was really cool. It had like a storm in it.
Like a storm trapped inside.
Right,
yeah, so...
right. And like you could hear the lightning and it was cool because like that was what the like powers were. That like, you know, the winds, the electricity.
Yeah. So that primal stone was specifically a sky primal stone. So the powers of the sky is what he's capable of controlling when he's using that as a conduit. Because otherwise humans don't have that ability to use, you know, magic at all unless you're using dark magic, basically. I think that that's a cool touch to the series, that, you know, it kind of limits your main characters just a little bit.
And they have to use like a draconic to actually complete the spell too, which was really cool.
Yeah, that I think that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I had what's her name vibes. Amelia, I can't. Now I'm losing her name. Daenerys Stormborn when he's like Dracarys at the.
Okay, yeah.
And
yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
oh, Dracarys. Sure. I was like, nice. I even with Callum, I got a. Did you guys ever watch Merlin?
The BBC show? I watched like an episode.
All right, so
same.
This was like a. I'd say early on in a relationship. This was like slightly a test. I was like, I'm really into this, and Lauren got into it with me, and I kind of see a lot of Callum in that, kind of like this bumbling but powerful, you know, mage type who's learning the ropes, as it were.
Okay, yeah, and there is a lot of that, you know, like, because he doesn't know. He's literally just copying what he saw Claudia do. He saw 2 spells that Claudia did, and that becomes his 2 spells for the whole season. And it works, you know, like, it works for him. That's all he needs, is like the ability to like blow like extra hard wind and zap some people. So I thought that was pretty cool.
I like that moment where he's like sleeping. And like so like earlier in the season, Callum and Claudia have like an interaction where she uses like, you know, like a light breeze, and you know, she mentions like something like, oh, can you like smell the peanut butter? He's like, oh, is that part of the spell? She's like, no, that's what I ate. And then he's like sleeping, and then he's like, yeah, I can still smell the peanut butter. And then his brother and Ezran like confronts him about it, like, hey, what were you dreaming about? He's like, I was dreaming about, they're like, yeah, he was like, you're talking about peanut butter. He's like, yeah, sandwiches. Dude.
When you're older, I'll have a nice long talk about sandwiches to you.
Ezra was so confused. Oh my gosh, yeah. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Rayla. Like she's an interesting character. She's obviously a moon elf that doesn't really want to harm people, and you see it earlier in the season. Like there's a moment where she could have killed somebody, but she opted not to. And
yeah, she's an assassin who's never killed.
Right. And they do this oath where they like wrap this, it's like a ribbon around their arms or around, wherever, their arm, their wrist or whatever. And they have to complete whatever oath, or it's just going to keep on squeezing until that part just
dies and falls off.
Right, exactly. And
which sounds terrible. Like, it sounds like so painful.
For real. And, she was like completely like prepared, like, throughout the season for this to happen. Like, she was like, I'm glad like I didn't kill, like her task was to kill Ezran. Obviously she didn't. And, she's fully prepared. And, we have that moment where we get the Dragon Prince, hatches from his egg. And I'm assuming that like dragon magic is the strongest, because like nothing could have like broken this. She's tried cutting it off with her blades. She found somebody had a sun blade that she tried to use.
Yeah.
That was really cool. That it was almost like that's like a lightsaber essentially, And
yeah, the Sunforged blade. Yeah, I thought it was really cool.
And like that couldn't do anything, but the Dragon Prince was able to bite it off, and I thought that was really cool. And I was wondering how they were going to go about that. Like, I obviously at some point they were going to find a way for this to come out, or for her to cut it off, and it was cool that happened.
Yeah, for sure. So I really did like Rayla as a character because she was conflicted. She doesn't want to hurt Callum and Ezran, and she was withholding information from them for a while because I think she does, pretty early on consider them friends.
Yeah.
The truth of why she's there was clearly burdening her. So, like, the idea that she needed to kill Prince Ezran was one of the bindings that until he was dead, that binding was going to continue constricting her. So the other binding that she had on her other hand is interesting because it did go away as soon as King Harrow supposedly died. We didn't see his death, but as soon as King Harrow died, the binding on that wrist came off. And she has yet to tell Ezran and Callum that their parent has died at this point.
Right. And like she knew it because remember when that one arrow was shot, that was what was attached to it was the fallen, that fallen ribbon of.
Yes.
So
so she definitely knew that had been done, and also like the ribbon fell off of her hand.
Right.
One of them. So yeah, she's just holding that, and it's probably eating away at her. I'd assume, because you've made two and a glowing frog friend, and you want to. You don't want to hurt them, but you know that you have to continue by their side if you want this quest to succeed.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of the last couple episodes where they go up to the Cursed Caldera and meet up with that one girl? I forget her name.
I think her wolf was named Ava.
That sounds right. Yeah.
But there was definitely some deep lessons that were being taught, in this, like, and which is, I mean, something that you're obviously going to get in shows like this, especially geared towards like a younger audience. Like, I remember there's a moment between, her and Callum, and, was talking about like, they were talking about the stone, and he was just like, oh, I really can't do anything without the stone. Like, I'm nothing. And, she's like, oh, well, I think that you would be pretty great with or without it, and I like it when shows have that stuff. Avatar had that a lot, and when there's a lesson like that to be told, I think that no matter what age you are, that's something that needs to be heard. And yeah, like I thought that they were really good. It was interesting There was a lot of humor in those last couple episodes, especially with, they come against those like illusion monsters, and they well, except for that slug. I don't think that slug thing was that definitely was not an illusion, but that
Well, I don't know about that actually. I mean, yeah, it was. They claimed by the end that everything that we saw and faced was an illusion, but I don't think I think you're right. Like that seemed a little too real and it was too much of a threat, and they actually did defeat it. Like they cut it open, and then there was a whole bunch of little baby slugs. So
and then there
that
was that
real.
whole that whole like monster that was killed by it too, and the blood was sucked out. So I think that was real, but like the spider obviously was an illusion. So the wolf Ava, there was a thing that happened when it was younger. It was its paw was like cut, or it was crushed in a trap, and they ended up having to cut that limb off. And so like while this wolf was young, it was brought over up into the cursed caldera, and so this whole time the elf, I forgot her name, the illusionist elf.
Yeah,
That
she's also a Moonshadow elf.
right. And so like she gave off the idea that she healed the whole arm of this wolf, and there was like this like stone around the neck. Well, we come to find out that like that leg was not real at all. Like it was just that the wolf didn't need that leg there, and obviously that wolf knew that there was no leg there the whole time.
Yeah, that wolf was a liar. Wolf was playing along.
Well, no, the wolf told Ezran. The wolf told Ezran that like there was no healer. Remember?
Yeah. Okay, you're right.
Yeah, like so that was actually like a little bit of an interesting take too. That Ezran has this connection with animals and can like kind of understand and speak to them.
Yeah, and that's actually, you can see that even like in the beginning of the show, not only because like he's attached to the glowtoad bait, but when they first get in touch and like hold on to the egg, they can, Ezran specifically can tell that it's doing well or it's not doing well.
Yeah.
Like he can feel it immediately. So that was a cool touch. Rich, what did you feel about that cursed caldera bit?
We got to see like kind of the more magic elements, and probably because of the lack of like that kind of dividing line or the guarding of the area. So for me, looking into season 2, I'm expecting to see more magical creatures, I guess, so something that kind of dances there more, because we spent a lot of time in the human half of the world, and now it's I'm expecting to see a lot more of that magic in there. I want to see how, I'm hoping that into season 2 they do something. I want to see what they're going to do with the whole dragons. Like dragons have been, I love, look, I'm going to be clear, I love dragons. So if there's a dragon in something, I'm generally a huge fan of it, so I don't even really care as much, but I would like to see how the dragons are going to exist in this world, right? Because they're so often that power that eventually could fall into the wrong hands, and the good guy is trying to make sure that doesn't. And I hope it's, I don't want the story just to be like Viren trying to get his hands on the Dragon Prince because he's the nuclear bomb, essentially, right?
I get it, yeah.
Because that's everywhere. We see that so many times.
There is definitely more than just the Dragon Prince and his mother. There's more dragons in this world than just those two. So he's not the end-all be-all weapon for the humans, basically. I'm talking about the Dragon Prince here. But yeah, it's an interesting, like, I don't know if it's a prediction, but it's like a desire. Like that's something that you want to see, is just more dragons and how they interact with society and how they show their power. And yeah, is there anything that you want to see moving forward, Anthony?
I definitely want to see more of those stones. Like I want to see, I'd like to see Callum kind of come into his own a little bit more, and like, utilizing those. Like, I mean, obviously, like he like destroyed the one that he had, but
right.
Obviously, that's not going to be the only one that they come across. At least I hope not.
Right. So we know that he is, adept at magic, and he has never really actively studied it, but as soon as he gets his hand on the ability to do it, he does it pretty well.
Decently, right, right.
So that's a good, I guess as to what is coming next. What do you guys feel about Claudia and Soren, the son and daughter of Viren, who are now tasked to, he tasks Soren, basically, you got to kill the princes. He doesn't say that, openly, but like, you have to come back with the news that the princes are dead.
Yeah.
And with Claudia, he tasks her to, like, at all costs, get the egg, even if your brother's life is at risk, So they're both given morally challenging tasks. How do you feel that they will fare, and or whether or not they will have the guts to go through with whatever it was asked of them?
I think it's, for me, Claudia's...
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. It's weird. I almost think she's the least likely, actually, to bring harm upon them. But she could also be what gets Callum to lower his guard because he's got a crush on her. Whereas Soren is all about duty and honor, He was even... See, but that's interesting because he questions his father at one point, I remember, where he just doesn't believe that it's the right thing to do. So, I think...
Yeah, I don't think either of them are bad people.
Yeah.
They're Soren is very much like a machismo kind of guy, where he's always, just like, he's kind of a bully a little bit, but that doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. Just makes you've just gone astray a little bit. And with Claudia, she's just, or I don't know if she's just, but she's tapped into dark magic. So there's a little bit of like evil there, even though she's outwardly pretty and funny, and she's always like giggling and happy. So it's kind of like, is there more like evil there than we've seen yet or not? And that's kind of how I feel about Claudia at this point. What about you, Anthony?
It's definitely would be interesting to see if she does go down like, a dark path. I mean, I guess it could happen in a way where her and Callum kind of face off, and it's definitely a conflict because there's some sort of like feelings there, at least one-sided. He feels something, but I'm not 100% sure that Soren would. I don't think he would cause any harm. There is that closeness there. It's tough to say. I mean, they're both. I mean, even Claudia. They both say that their father said some stuff that was, maybe morally questionable, so I don't think that they're, I just don't know. Like, I don't think that they would actually go down that path, but, we'll see.
We'll see. Okay. What did you guys think overall of the first season? Rich, we'll start with you.
I think I was really helped by the fact that we were going to do a podcast on it. At one point you mentioned this idea that it's charming and it's nice, but it doesn't really grab you, right? I think on my first watch through, and mind you, I mean, I think I've mentioned this before, but pandemic has ruined me forever, and I two-screen stuff way too much, so I found myself quickly, and because the episodes feed into each other so quickly, that I kind of sat down one afternoon, threw it on, and it was like bloop, gone, and I was like, whoa. And I needed to do a rewatch to kind of reprocess. I actually did like a little jump just to kind of get my names down again before I did my second watch. Then it kind of, again, it was just, I got to see a lot more. I got to unpack more layers and get more into it. But I think that if I hadn't, if we were doing this show, I probably would have watched one season and been like, okay, it's cool, and I'm not sure if I would have jumped into a second one. I mean, I have betrayed my family. They heard me talking about it, and they were, my Charlie loves Avatar, and so does Lauren. So they were, we can't wait to watch it with you, but they waited too long. So probably going to have to do another season 1 with them before we go into it.
Okay.
But then, then I get to kind of be the kind sage on the journey, where they're like, wait, what happened to the king? And I'm like, don't worry, guys. Nobody's supposed to know.
Yeah. Anthony, what are your thoughts? You said that early on you weren't totally grabbed, but you kind of got the vibe of the show by episode 5 or so.
Yeah.
How do you feel now about the whole first season?
The first season, was pretty good. You can tell that there's a lot more story to be told. A lot of it, like you said, it's so easy to cover, or like you said, it like how the episodes are like super fast, maybe like 20 minutes, maybe less if you skip, a lot of the stuff in the beginning, the intro and whatnot. But it's good. I enjoyed it, but I feel like it's gonna get better.
Oh yeah, and I think that is like a solid guess, because just from my experience, the show builds on itself, and so many of the characters that you grow to enjoy become characters that you grow to love, and I think just they add new dynamics every season. So I'm excited to. I don't know if we're covering this next season, like next week or sometime down the line, but yeah, I'm excited to eventually cover that. Speaking of which, what are we covering next week? Do you want to continue with Dragon Prince? I have no problem with that, but if you guys have another idea in mind, I'm okay with that.
I don't know. Do you have anything, Rich? I mean, I threw something out there, but it's up to you guys.
Oh, we could do what you wanted to do. I know that you said that you wanted to do Marvel Rivals, and actually this would probably be a good week to do that because I'm off of work, so I can start playing that on my downtime a little bit more than I would have normally.
Yeah, I could play that.
There's also, well, it's also a good time because you're getting the rest of the Fantastic Four dropping in on Friday.
Oh snap!
Nice.
Yeah, we're getting Human Torch and The Thing.
Cool. Rich, are you cool with getting out of your comfort zone a little bit and playing a little Marvel Rivals?
Yeah, I'll dive into the deep end of exposing myself to the internet.
Oh no.
I mean,
oh no, he's gonna be addicted. Anthony, he's gonna be.
Can I be honest with you guys? My real fear.
You can be honest. Yeah.
There was Marvel. Was it called? Maybe it was Marvel Heroes 2015. It was a PC game, and I think it was Rival-esque.
Oh yeah.
I think it was Rival-esque, although it had this whole one-player mode. But I remember at one point I was playing it, or was it that Lauren had asked me to play less video games, and we were early on in our relationship, so I thought that meant she wanted to use the TV, and I was hogging it. So then I started playing this game. And we had a giant monitor that her mom had given us. Like, it was like 26 inches or some bullshit, right? So when I'm behind it, you couldn't see me. And I just put my headphones on, and when I start meeting people online to like do things, that's when I know I have to get out, right? Like when I'm like, oh shoot, it's 7:45, I've got to meet up with my group, and that's.
I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. As soon as I hear voices, I turn off the voices. I just want to play the game. I don't listen to anything.
Neither do I.
I do not want to hear anyone talking, so I turn off their voices immediately.
Dude, I'm the same way. The only time that I really speak with people online is if it's like friends that I know, and then like I'll coordinate in that kind of way.
In Fallout,
I know you're talking about Marvel Heroes was like Diablo.
Yeah, and I really got into that. So I mean, I guess if I don't have to hear their voices, I think I can. I think
you don't. Yeah, you can. It's a choice.
No, you could just do your thing,
you
own
can
thing.
Toggle it off. So that's what we'll do, guys. Next week we're going to be covering the new game that's been shaking up the Overwatch scene, Marvel Rivals.
Yeah.
We'll talk. You've probably heard about it. You've probably seen it online. So we'll talk more about what it is and how it works next week. But yeah, thanks so much for listening to us here on our 110th episode of Project Geekology. Again, if you have not, please be sure to go to your podcast application and give us a review. I think, Anthony, you had a certain type of review in mind.
Hey, man. Juicy and sizzling, bro.
Like a fajita.
Or a burger. Or a veggie burger if that's more of your speed.
A sizzling veggie burger. I've never heard of that, but I'm sure they have existed at some point. Yeah, if you guys want to check out any of our socials, be sure to click down in the show notes down below. And also be sure to read the AI drivel that the podcast application spits out, because it's actually quite enjoyable. And sometimes it's kind of accurate, but there's always going to be some like wild, like it'll take like a 2-minute section of our discussion out of a like hour plus podcast and make that a whole paragraph out of, you know, it's a bizarre system, but it's funny. I'm excited.
It does a better job at breaking something down than we are.
Yeah, what's funny is it basically like it goes in and just like truncates what we have to say into, you know, bite-sized stuff, but sometimes what it actually says is wild. So have fun with this one. All right, guys, see you next week.
Goodbye, y'all.
I might even play the Wolverine.